Welcome to Daily Papers, the podcast where we break down fascinating new research papers. So, I have a question for you. When you ask an AI chatbot a question, say about a health concern or for some advice, do you ever feel like it's trying to convince you of something?
That's a great question. You think you're just getting a straightforward answer, but you might feel a little nudge in one direction or another. It's subtle, and it's exactly what a new paper called Spontaneous Persuasion looks into.
Spontaneous persuasion? That sounds a little sneaky. Is my AI trying to manipulate me?
Well, the researchers say it's not that dramatic. They define spontaneous persuasion as the way large language models, or LLMs, use persuasive strategies in everyday conversations, even when nobody asks them to. It's not necessarily intentional, it's just how they're built to communicate.
Okay, so how on earth do you study that? You can't exactly put a chatbot in a lab and ask it what its intentions are.
Right, so the researchers got creative. They set up a massive experiment where they simulated 6,000 different conversations between a user and 5 different LLMs, the engines behind tools like ChatGPT and others.
6,000 conversations. What were they talking about?
All sorts of things. The topics were pulled from popular Reddit communities. So you had some lighthearted stuff from a forum called Explain Like I'm 5, but also heavier topics from subreddits about mental health, politics, and even marketing advice.
And they were just looking for these hidden persuasive techniques?
Exactly. They developed a whole system to automatically detect and label different kinds of persuasive strategies. Then they compared the AI's conversations to how actual humans talk about the same topics on Reddit. It's a huge digital audit of how AI tries to win us over.
So what's the verdict? Are these LLMs actually persuasive when they're just having a normal chat?
The answer is a resounding yes. In fact, it's one of the paper's biggest findings. The AIs used at least one persuasive technique in virtually every single conversation. We're talking 99.9% of the time.
Wow, that is a lot. So it's not spontaneous, it's constant. What kinds of techniques are we talking about here? What's their go-to move?
Their number one favorite strategy is something called logical appeal. This is exactly what it sounds like. The AI relies heavily on facts, figures, evidence, and structured reasoning. The paper gives an example where a user asks for advice about depression, and the AI immediately responds with statistics like over 20 million adults in the US have experienced a major depressive episode.
Ah, so it's like talking to a very knowledgeable, slightly robotic professor. It tries to persuade you by just overwhelming you with objective-sounding information.
That's a perfect way to put it. It builds this sense of authority and impartiality. But what's really interesting is that they don't always stick to that script. The topic of conversation can completely change their style.
How so?
Well, while logical appeal was king in topics like politics or marketing, when the conversation turned to mental health, the AIs totally switched gears. They started using more emotional and supportive strategies like encouragement, affirmation, and alliance building.
So they were saying things like, you're not alone in this, or it's a sign of strength that you're even talking about this.
Precisely. It shows the models are sophisticated enough to know that when someone is talking about their feelings, hitting them with cold, hard facts might not be the most effective or persuasive approach. They can kind of read the room.
That's fascinating. So how does all this compare to us? How do humans try to persuade each other?
This is where it gets really interesting, because we are basically the polar opposite of AIs. The researchers analyzed the most popular human comments on the same Reddit threads, and they found that we humans are way less focused on pure logic.
Let me guess. We're all about feelings and personal stories.
You nailed it. Humans rely heavily on strategies that build social connection and emotional resonance. We use things like non-expert testimonial, which is just a fancy way of saying, hey, this happened to me once, or my friend tried this and it worked. We also use a lot of emotional appeals.
So if an AI is like Spock, all logic and data, humans are more like, well, regular people, using stories and emotions to connect and persuade.
Exactly. And this difference might explain a lot. The researchers suggest this is why people often see AIs as objective and impartial. They don't use the same emotionally charged social techniques we do, so their arguments can feel more trustworthy even when they're subtly nudging you.
So, what happens when you take away the spontaneous part? What if you explicitly tell an AI, okay, now I want you to be as persuasive as possible?
You'd think it might pull out some wild new tricks, but it doesn't. When the researchers prompted the LLMs to be explicitly persuasive, they just doubled down on what they were already doing.
More logic?
Way more logic. They just turned the dial up to 11 on logical appeal and another technique called framing, which is about presenting information in a very specific way to influence how you interpret it. They become even more like that hyper-logical professor.
This is all a bit mind-bending. Why does it matter that our chatbots are constantly spontaneously persuasive? Is this something we need to worry about?
The authors argue it's not about being afraid, but about being aware. These models are powerful communication tools, and persuasion is baked into how they communicate. That persuasion can be used for good, to encourage healthy behaviors, for example. But it also means we need to be critical consumers.
So it's about knowing that the way the AI presents information is just as important as the information itself.
Exactly. An AI might give you a list of pros and cons that seems perfectly balanced, but the very act of using structured logic and citing evidence is a persuasive technique. The paper shows that different AI models even have slightly different persuasive personalities. Some are more logical, others more emotionally supportive.
So the takeaway is that the next time you're chatting with an AI, it's worth paying a little attention to how it's talking to you, not just what it's saying. It's almost certainly trying to persuade you, even if it's just persuading you that its answer is the right one.
That's the perfect summary. It's a reminder that there's no such thing as a truly neutral conversation, especially when you're talking to a super intelligent machine.
Another fascinating look at the hidden dynamics of our world. That's all the time we have for today. Thanks for tuning in to Daily Papers.